The Riyadh sky that afternoon glowed dusty and orange, its light spilling through the towering glass windows of the Alhamdan Palace, a residence known throughout the city for its wealth, power, and intimidating grandeur. Inside a lavish room decorated with gold-plated furniture and Persian carpets sat a young woman named Tias Alhamdan, 24 years old, beautiful in the soft, pale way characteristic of Middle Eastern nobility. But beneath that elegance lay a truth she could never escape. Her legs had not moved in 3 years. A tragic car accident had not only stolen her mobility, but also emptied her heart. The people in the house pampered her out of obligation, not love. Worse, her father, Sheikh Khalid al-Hamdan, a prominent oil magnate, considered her condition an embarrassment. Countless specialists from Europe and the Gulf had been called, examined her, and left shaking their heads. Every failure carved a deeper hollow inside Tias. Hope slowly died, replaced by coldness, resentment, and quiet despair. That same day, a new worker arrived, Ringa, a 29-year-old man from central Java, Indonesia. His body was lean from farm work, his skin browned by the sun, his features simple yet warm, but his eyes, they carried a strange calmness, the kind that came from hardship, patience, and prayer. After crop failures and rising debts in his village, he had flown to Saudi Arabia seeking honest sustenance. His job here would be simple: gardener and caretaker of the outer grounds. Yet his arrival was not welcomed. The senior servants snickered at his accent, his modest clothes, his unfamiliarity with luxury. Even the first time Tia saw him from her wheelchair, she barely looked at him before remarking coldly, "A man like that isn't even worthy of cleaning our stables." The servants laughed cruelly. Ringa lowered his gaze, absorbing the humiliation silently. Inside, he whispered to himself, "Respect from others is not a requirement for honest work." Days passed in the scorching Riyadh heat as Ringa worked from morning until night, watering the garden, repairing broken pipes, planting new flowers in neglected corners of the yard. He rarely spoke. He only breathed, worked, and prayed. One afternoon, while trimming the hedges, he heard Tia scream from the balcony. The wheels of her chair were stuck in the direct sun. No servant was nearby. Without hesitation, Ringa climbed the side of the garden, pushed the wheelchair back into the shade, and stepped back quietly. Tias stared at him, shocked. "How dare you touch me without permission?" she snapped. Ringa bowed his head. "I was afraid you might fall, miss." Her anger flared, yet something in her chest trembled, though she did not understand why. That night, as Riyadh's cold desert wind swept through the palace grounds, Ringa sat alone behind the house reciting Al-Fatiha for his late mother. His voice was soft, uneven, but filled with sincerity, not performative like the grand imams she often heard. Tias listened from her balcony, frozen. The prayer felt raw, honest, and strangely comforting. For the first time in years, something warm touched her heart. The next morning, Tias tried to dismiss the strange calm she had felt from hearing Ringa's prayer, convincing herself it was meaningless. Yet, without realizing it, she asked one of the servants casually, "Who is he?" "That Indonesian man." The servant, surprised, answered, "Just a gardener from Java, miss." Tias immediately scoffed and pretended not to care, waving her hand dismissively. But that night, when the palace grew quiet and the night breeze whispered through the corridors, she found herself returning to the balcony, listening again, secretly, as Ringa recited the same soft prayer beneath the moonlight. Something about the humble way he spoke to God reached a place inside her that had been dead for 3 long years. One morning, while Ringa was drawing water near the garden, he heard Tia scream again. Her wheelchair had overturned on uneven ground. She lay helpless, unable to move her stiff legs. Ringa dropped the bucket and ran to her without a second thought. Carefully, respectfully, he lifted her upper body and adjusted her legs into a comfortable position. When he stepped back, she looked at him, not with anger this time, but confusion. "Why aren't you afraid to touch me?" she whispered. "Everyone looks at me like damaged goods." Ringa paused. "Because what is broken is not your body, miss," he replied softly. "It is the heart that breaks first." "And your heart? It is still alive." The words hit her like a sudden storm. For the first time in years, tears fell, not of pain, but of being seen as a human being, not a burden. From that day forward, something subtle shifted between them. Tias found excuses to call Ringa, asking the names of flowers, asking him to move her chair, asking him to fix the fountain outside her window. The other servants noticed her growing interest and mocked Ringa behind his back. "That villager will be fired soon," they laughed. But Ringa ignored them. He only knew that every time Tias smiled, the garden felt livelier. There was a softness returning to her features, a glow that had been absent for years. One afternoon, when Tias complained of intense cramping in her legs, Ringa hesitated before speaking. "I learned simple muscle massage from a village healer," he said quietly. "I used it for my mother when she was partially paralyzed. It may not cure you, but it might ease the pain." Tias snorted. "You think your rough hands can do what German doctors couldn't?" But then she saw sincerity in his eyes. No arrogance, no promises, just genuine concern. Reluctantly, she agreed. Under the shade of an old olive tree, Ringa knelt beside her and began gently massaging the stiff muscles in her calves and feet. His hands were warm, steady, and respectful. As he worked, he murmured a quiet Javanese prayer, strange, rhythmic words that Tias did not understand, yet they somehow vibrated deep within her chest. For the first time in 3 years, she felt something, a faint tingling in the tips of her toes. Her breath shook. "I think..." Something moved. Ringa's face lit up, but he kept his humility. "Don't rush hope, miss. The human body is miraculous when the heart is willing to heal." That afternoon, Tias smiled, genuinely, beautifully. A smile born from possibility. A smile she thought she had forgotten. Word of the strange healing began to circulate quietly among the servants. One of them had witnessed Ringa massaging Tias under the olive tree and immediately reported it to her mother. That night, Alhamdan, Tias's mother, summoned Ringa to her study. Her eyes were sharp and her tone colder than the desert wind. "Who are you to touch my daughter?" she demanded in Arabic. Ringa bowed deeply, voice calm yet respectful. "I only wish to help, madam." I meant no disrespect, but the mother's anger was uncontainable. "Do you think a worker's dirty hands can replace doctors? You, country bumpkin, how dare you interfere?" Ringa remained silent, simply bowing and murmuring, "I apologize." Before she could escalate the situation, Tias herself intervened, surprising everyone. With a firm voice that carried determination, she said, "I asked for his help, Umi. If he is dismissed, I will not eat." The room froze. Umi stared at her daughter in shock, her own anger faltering under the weight of Tias's courage. Slowly, she withdrew without a word, leaving Ringa standing quietly, unsure of what to say. That night, the dynamics of their relationship shifted irrevocably. Ringa understood that the bond between them had moved beyond pity or obligation. It had evolved into something sacred, unspoken, and transformative. Every afternoon afterward, Tias permitted him to continue the therapy sessions. Sometimes they merely sat in the garden. Sometimes he massaged her legs while softly reciting prayers. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her toes began to move. A small miracle, not of medicine, but of sincere intention and patient hearts. Each session brought a strange warmth to Tias. She began to look forward to Ringa's presence, anticipating the gentle pressure of his hands, the soft rhythm of his prayers, and the inexplicable comfort of knowing someone truly cared for her, not as a burden, but as a human being capable of life and hope. But the outside world was not so accepting. The family doctor came for a routine checkup, only to be astounded at her progress. This is impossible without medical therapy," he said, bewildered. "What are you doing, Ringa?" he asked sharply. Tias smiled, saying nothing. Ringa chose to remain silent. His hands moved with care, guided only by intention and faith. When Sheikh Khalid learned of the progress, his face darkened with rage. "You are meddling in my family with your village superstitions," he shouted at Ringa in front of everyone. "Forget her, or I will send you back to your country tonight." Ringa lowered his head, speaking softly. My only wish is to help her walk again, sir. With God's will, I want no reward beyond that. That night, T.S. could not sleep. She stared at the garden where Ringa usually worked, now empty. The pain in her legs returned, sharper than before. Loneliness gnawed at her, and she realized the truth. It was not the massages or prayers alone that healed her. It was the sincerity, the patience, and the care that had grown between them. In secret, she wrote a small letter and sent it to Ringa through a sympathetic servant. I don't know what God has planned, but if prayer can heal, please continue to pray for me from afar. Perhaps that is true love. Tia spent the night in quiet reflection, her heart tethered to a man far away, yet closer than anyone else in the world. The days without Ringa's constant presence felt like a cold desert wind cutting through Tias's chest. She tried to follow his guidance alone, wiggling her toes, flexing her stiff calves, mimicking the gentle exercises he had taught her. But without his hands, without the rhythm of his prayers guiding the therapy, her progress often faltered. One afternoon, she attempted to stand with the help of a chair. Her body, unused to weight-bearing for 3 long years, trembled violently. She collapsed immediately, pain shooting from her back to her chest. Yet the deepest ache was not physical. It was the hollow, echoing loneliness of her heart. Through her tears, she whispered softly, "Ringa, where are you?" Meanwhile, far from the palace, Ringa continued his duties in quiet obedience, performing the orders of the Alhamdan household. His heart was restless. Every night he looked up at the same Riyadh sky, praying in his soft Javanese accent for T.S. His prayer was simple, sincere, and constant. "O God, heal her, not for my sake, but because she has waited patiently with a heart strong enough to bear this trial." Then one evening, the servant who had once carried T.S.'s letter arrived at Ringa's small quarters with troubling news. "Miss T.S. has fallen again. She refuses to eat. She doesn't speak much." Ringa's chest tightened, his hands trembling slightly. He wanted to rush to her side to lift her into his arms, but the strict orders forbade him from approaching the palace. That night, he prayed longer than usual until the first pale light of dawn filtered through the small windows of his room. His words were fervent, each syllable carrying hope and sincerity. The effort left him exhausted, yet resolute. The following morning, the head housekeeper approached him. "The master requests your presence in the living room," she said, voice steady but carrying an edge. Ringa's stomach tightened, but he obeyed. In the grand living room, Sheikh Khalid sat rigidly, the family doctor by his side. His gaze was sharp, demanding answers. "What have you done to her before?" "She is calmer, yet more mobile." "Explain yourself." Ringa bowed his head humbly. "I cannot promise a cure, sir. But with prayer and God's guidance, I will try to help her. That is all I can do." The doctor and Sheikh Khalid exchanged skeptical glances, but something in Ringa's steady demeanor spoke louder than words. He was not deceitful. He did not seek wealth or recognition. His heart was simple, pure, and focused only on healing. That day, Ringa was allowed to return to Tias's room. She sat pale, hair tangled, eyes swollen from crying, yet relief flickered across her face the moment she saw him. "I thought you wouldn't come again," she murmured. "I'm here, miss. Let's begin slowly, carefully," Ringa replied softly. With her father's begrudging permission, he resumed the gentle massages, combining physical therapy with prayer and deep breathing exercises. Every touch, every word, carried the memory of his mother's lessons, uniting faith, patience, and purpose. For the first time in years, T.S. experienced a night without excruciating pain. Her body relaxed, her heart lifted, and a faint sense of hope, fragile yet persistent, returned. In the following weeks, a subtle transformation began. Every morning, Ringa arrived at the garden with quiet determination. Every afternoon, T.S. engaged in the exercises he guided her through, slowly regaining strength she had thought lost forever. Under the warm Riyadh sun, surrounded by the meticulously tended flowers and trees, T.S. experienced sensations she hadn't felt in years. A flutter of movement in her toes, a gentle stretch in her calves, and a deep, pulsing warmth in her heart. She began to stand with the help of a cane, first for a few seconds, then for longer moments, each attempt filled with both triumph and trepidation. Ringa's hands never forced her, never pushed too hard. He followed her pace, letting patience and prayer guide every movement. He recited quiet prayers as he massaged her calves, ankles, and feet, blending his Javanese words with gentle encouragement. Though she did not understand the language, Tias felt the rhythm of his voice resonate within her chest, each syllable a balm to her weary spirit. Word of Tias's recovery soon reached the household doctors. Their professional skepticism clashed with the undeniable truth they observed. Medically, this is impossible without consistent therapy, one said, shaking his head in disbelief. Yet no one could account for the progress she made in just a few weeks. Sheikh Khalid, however, was furious. He called Ringa in front of the household. "You are meddling with my daughter's life using your village superstitions," he snapped. "I will not tolerate this. Forget her, or you will leave this house immediately." Ringa's eyes lowered in respect, his voice calm and measured. "Sir, my intention is pure. I only wish for her to walk again." Nothing more, nothing less, Tias, who had been observing quietly, stepped forward with newfound resolve. Her voice trembled but carried a strength that stunned the entire room. "Father, I asked for his help. Without him, I am still trapped in my body. If he leaves, I cannot continue." The room went silent. Even Alhamdan, her mother, who often kept quiet, could not suppress her astonishment. Sheikh Khalid stared at his daughter, his anger clashing with a growing realization. Tias was no longer a passive child. Ringa returned to her room and their sessions resumed. Slowly, methodically, Tias progressed. Her fingers grazed the cane lightly, her toes curled, then flexed, her calves stretched without pain. With each session, a faint glow returned to her face, a mixture of physical progress and the emotional relief of being truly cared for. Outside the palace, life continued as usual. Yet, in the secluded garden where the olive tree stood, a silent miracle was unfolding. The man and woman from two different worlds were bound not by wealth or status, but by faith, patience, and a shared struggle against despair. Every evening, Tias found herself waiting for Ringa's approach. Each time he came, her heart fluttered, not with love in the romantic sense, but with gratitude, hope, and a deep emotional awakening. For Ringa, this work was sacred, a duty of the heart, not a job. For Tias, each moment with him reminded her that the human spirit can endure far more than the body can, and that healing sometimes begins where medicine ends, in the sincerity of someone who cares. In the shadow of the olive tree, the miracle of trust and patience began to blossom, and neither Tias nor Ringa could deny the bond forming between them. A bond forged not by desire, but by shared humanity and unwavering faith. Weeks passed, and Tias's progress became undeniable. The once rigid and immobile legs now responded to gentle coaxing. Each day, she could stand a little longer with her cane, shift her weight, and take tentative steps. It was not merely physical movement, it was a rebirth of hope, a rekindling of spirit that had been dormant for 3 years. Ringa's presence, so quiet and consistent, had become the invisible anchor of her recovery. Tias began to anticipate their sessions with a mixture of eagerness and nervousness. She would watch from her balcony as he walked through the garden, carrying his simple tools, moving deliberately yet with care. Even the smallest gestures, a glance, a gentle nod, stirred something deep within her. She no longer saw him as merely a servant or a foreign worker. She recognized in him the purity of intent, a soul committed to easing another's pain without seeking recognition. One afternoon, she asked him softly, but, "Ringa, will I ever be able to walk like before?" Her voice trembled, a mixture of hope and fear. Ringa looked down at her, his hands steady and warm as he adjusted the position of her stiff calves. "Miss Tias," he said, "the body is a vessel, but it listens only to the heart. If the heart trusts and dares to move, the body will follow. God has given you patience. Now let it guide you." Tias allowed him to massage her legs, feeling the same tingling warmth spread through her toes and calves. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, yet undeniable. Her chest expanded, her breathing became rhythmic, and for the first time, she felt alive in her body rather than trapped by it. The garden, once silent and lifeless, seemed to bloom alongside her spirit. The wind rustled through the olive tree leaves, the sun kissed the flowers, and a distant bird sang, as if marking this quiet miracle. Yet not everyone in the Alhamdan household understood what was happening. Some servants whispered doubts, suspicious of the closeness between a wealthy young lady and a foreign gardener. "This will not end well," they murmured. Others mocked Ringa behind his back, calling him naive and foolish. But Ringa did not waver. He had no desire for wealth, no wish for recognition. His world was simple: help Tias reclaim her mobility, honor God through sincere effort, and leave the rest to fate. One evening, Tias ventured to the garden alone, balancing on her cane. Ringa noticed her faltering steps and approached quietly. "Careful, Miss Tias," he whispered, guiding her with steady hands. She looked at him, eyes brimming with gratitude. I don't know how to thank you," she murmured. Ringa only smiled, a soft, humble expression. "There is no need for thanks. Your courage is reward enough." As the sun dipped below the Riyadh horizon, casting golden light across the garden, Tias took a bold step forward. One foot, then the other, supported by Ringa's gentle hands. She felt a surge of exhilaration and disbelief. The movement, though small, carried with it years of longing, despair, and hope, finally met with fulfillment. Her heart raced, not from exertion, but from the realization that she was walking again, even if just a few steps at a time. For the first time in years, Tias smiled, not a polite or forced smile, but a genuine one, radiating warmth and gratitude. Ringa's heart lifted at her joy, but he remained composed, knowing that the real reward was the patient strength Tias discovered within herself. Their journey was far from over, yet each step, each breath, and each whispered prayer brought them closer to a miracle that was neither of wealth nor medicine, but of faith, patience, and human connection. As Tias's strength grew, so did her independence. She could now maneuver her wheelchair with ease when necessary and stand briefly without support. Each afternoon, she and Ringa spent hours in the garden, combining gentle exercises with prayer and meditation. Ringa never rushed her. He let her body and spirit dictate the pace, guiding with patience and quiet encouragement. The rhythm of his hands, coupled with the soft intonation of his Javanese prayers, created an atmosphere that was simultaneously serene and empowering. Yet, the outside world still viewed their relationship with skepticism. The household doctor, though impressed with Tias's physical recovery, repeatedly questioned the methods employed by Ringa. "This progress is medically inexplicable without proper therapy," he would insist. Sheikh Khalid, too, remained wary, his pride and concern for appearances often overshadowing the genuine results unfolding before him. "You are meddling in my daughter's life with superstition and foreign customs," he warned Ringa sharply during a rare confrontation. "Step away or you leave this house immediately." Ringa, unflinching, responded simply, "Sir, my purpose is to help her walk again, nothing more. I seek no reward or recognition. Only her recovery matters." Despite these warnings, Tias began to assert herself more boldly. She insisted on continuing the therapy sessions, even secretly encouraging Ringa when her father's orders seemed to threaten their progress. She recognized in him something rare, a man whose dedication was rooted not in wealth, ambition, or ego, but in sincerity, patience, and faith. One afternoon, under the olive tree, Tias attempted her first unsupported step. Her legs trembled violently, but she refused to fall back into fear. Ringa's hands hovered nearby, ready to assist if necessary, yet he let her struggle in triumph on her own. The moment she balanced on her own, even for a few seconds, her chest swelled with triumph and her eyes sparkled with disbelief and joy. I'm doing it," she whispered, voice trembling. Ringa smiled, pride and reverence reflected in his quiet demeanor. "Yes, Miss Tias. Your body listens to your courage. Every step is a victory." News of Tias's progress spread quietly beyond the household. Servants who had once mocked Ringa now watched in awe, realizing that his presence and methods had achieved what countless doctors had failed to do. Even Sheikh Khalid began to soften, though he would not yet admit it openly. He could not deny that his daughter, long considered fragile and helpless, was regaining her vitality. For Tias, the sessions were more than physical therapy. They were a restoration of confidence, a rekindling of her spirit. She began walking slightly longer distances each day, sometimes without her cane, always with Ringa nearby. The garden, once a lifeless expanse of sand and neglected plants, seemed to flourish alongside her renewed spirit. Flowers bloomed brighter, the wind carried a gentle fragrance, and the olive tree's leaves shimmered as if acknowledging the small miracles unfolding beneath it. In these moments, Tias realized that healing was more than physical. It was trust, patience, and the quiet, unwavering presence of someone who believed in her when she had nearly abandoned belief in herself. Ringa had become more than a caretaker. He was a catalyst, a guide, and, in the most profound sense, a mirror reflecting the strength she had long forgotten. The garden became a sanctuary, a sacred space where body, heart, and spirit could align. Each day brought new small triumphs, each step forward a testament to what could be achieved when compassion, faith, and persistence converged. One evening, after a long afternoon session, Tias and Ringa sat under the shade of the olive tree, watching the sun sink behind the golden Riyadh horizon. The garden, which had once felt cold and lifeless, now radiated warmth and serenity. Birds chirped softly in the distance, and the faint rustle of leaves in the evening breeze carried a peaceful rhythm. Tias, her cane resting beside her, glanced at Ringa with a quiet intensity. "Ringa," she began, her voice soft yet laced with vulnerability. "When I am fully healed, will you leave?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions. Ringa lowered his gaze, reflecting the weight of unvoiced truths. "Miss Tias," he replied, voice gentle, "my work here is to help you, not to stay. My land, my home, calls me back. It is not love that binds me, but duty." Tias bit her lip, a subtle tremor betraying the conflict within her. "But what if I don't want you to leave?" she whispered, almost afraid to hear his response. Ringa looked up at her, his eyes calm yet filled with a quiet gravity. "Then pray with me," he said softly, "because what binds us is not possession, but destiny. Only God decides our paths." The following days were filled with renewed determination. Tias's steps grew stronger, more confident. She could now walk short distances with her cane and even attempt moments of balance without support. Ringa continued his sessions, guiding her carefully with hands that carried both experience and devotion. Each movement, each touch, was infused with prayers whispered under the soft Javanese rhythm he had always maintained. Yet the tranquility was interrupted by news of an important visitor. Fahd al-Mutayri, a young, polite, and well-educated Arab nobleman, arrived at the palace with the intention of proposing marriage to Tias. For Sheikh Khalid, this was an opportunity to restore family prestige and secure a socially advantageous alliance. For Tias, however, the announcement felt like a sudden storm. Her heart, so recently stirred by courage and hope, now threatened to break anew. That night, Tias called Ringa to the garden in secrecy. Her voice was a mixture of fear and resignation. "Father wants me to marry that man. I cannot refuse him." Ringaga's face darkened momentarily. His hands, which had so often comforted her physically, now trembled slightly from the weight of unspoken emotions. After a long pause, his voice broke gently. "If this is what brings you peace, miss, I will pray for your happiness." Tias's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, the love that had silently healed her body and heart now became a source of heartbreak. Each step she took toward recovery felt heavier, burdened by the knowledge that her strongest supporter, the one who had helped her walk again, would soon be sent away. As the days of engagement preparations approached, Tias continued therapy, but each session was now tinged with melancholy. She could walk more confidently, yet each movement reminded her of what she might lose. Ringa maintained his quiet professionalism, masking his own inner conflict. He knew that Tias's recovery was his mission, but his heart silently yearned for the connection that had blossomed between them, an unspoken bond of trust, care, and profound emotional intimacy. The garden, once a place of quiet growth, now mirrored the tension between hope and impending separation. Every leaf, every shadow seemed to hold a memory of shared prayers, whispered encouragement, and moments of silent triumph that had brought Tias back from the depths of despair. The days leading up to Tias's engagement became a mix of triumph and anguish. Her legs, once rigid and immobile, were now capable of steady steps, a miracle that had astonished doctors and servants alike. Yet each stride she took carried a bittersweet weight, the knowledge that the person who had guided her toward this new life, Ringa, would soon leave. She could walk, yes, but her heart felt as if it remained tethered to him, invisible strings pulling with every step. On the day of the engagement meeting, the Alhamdan residence buzzed with preparation. Flowers adorned every hallway, servants scurried to perfect the arrangements, and family members rehearsed their appearances of pride and delight. Tias, dressed elegantly, tried to summon a smile for the assembled guests, but it felt hollow. She moved with grace, yet inside, every step echoed the absence of the man who had restored her mobility and her hope. During the ceremony, Fad al-Mutayri, poised and courteous, repeatedly praised Tias, commenting on her beauty, poise, and courage. He could sense the conflict in her eyes, yet he remained respectful, offering smiles and gentle words. But Tias barely responded, her focus elsewhere. Her mind replayed Ringa's quiet presence in the garden, the soft warmth of his hands, the prayers that had once stirred life within her legs and soul. Amidst the formalities, a servant discreetly handed Tias a small letter. Her hands trembled as she opened it, and her eyes scanned the familiar handwriting, Ringa's. Each sentence cut through her carefully maintained composure like a knife, words of hope, encouragement, and farewell. Tears spilled freely, unbidden, cascading down her cheeks as she read in silence. Fahd, noticing her distress, leaned closer in concern. "Miss Tias, are you all right?" he asked gently. She blinked, attempting to regain control, but her voice caught in her throat. She could not speak. She stood, trembling slightly, and turned away from the crowd, guided by an inner urgency she could no longer ignore. At that precise moment, outside the palace grounds, Ringa was preparing to leave. A small bag slung over his shoulder, he moved quietly through the servants' corridor, unaware that Tias had already decided she would not let him go without a fight. Without hesitation, she requested a private driver and rushed from the palace, moving through the scorching Riyadh streets with newfound determination. Her legs, once fragile, now carried her with power born of desperation and love. Halfway to the workers' terminal, she saw him, Ringa, small bag in hand, stepping through the sunlit path. "Ringa!" she shouted, her voice breaking with relief and emotion. He turned, startled, and before he could process the sight, Tias had leapt from the car and wrapped herself around him in an embrace that spoke volumes, gratitude, joy, longing, and relief, all at once. The world around them disappeared. Drivers paused, pedestrians stared, but neither Tias nor Ringa cared. Her legs, which had once been imprisoned by tragedy, now supported her fully. "I can walk, Ringa, because you made me believe," she whispered, tears streaming freely. Ringa, silent, let the moment linger, his own eyes glistening as he whispered back, "Alhamdulillah. Not because of me, miss, but because your heart was ready to heal." The miracle they had shared was no longer confined to the garden. It had become a testament of perseverance, faith, and the unspoken power of human compassion. The reunion at the terminal marked not only a personal triumph, but also a shift in the Alhamdan household. Sheikh Khalid, who had once questioned Ringa's presence, arrived moments later, witnessing the embrace. His eyes softened, and for the first time, he truly understood the depth of what had occurred. The boy he had dismissed as a simple gardener had restored not only Tias's mobility, but also her spirit. Sheikh Khalid approached Ringa, his voice calm, stripped of former anger. "I owe you, son," he said solemnly. "You have returned my daughter to herself." Ringa bowed deeply, acknowledging the recognition but remaining humble. "I only did what I could, sir," he replied softly. From that day, Ringa's role in the household transformed. No longer a mere servant, he became a therapy assistant and caretaker of the rehabilitation garden, a space that also served as a sanctuary for others seeking hope. His salary increased, and he received better living quarters, yet he retained his simplicity, living modestly and focused entirely on helping others find their own strength. Tias continued her recovery, walking confidently, even unassisted for short distances. She began to aid her mother in managing a foundation for disabled children in Riyadh, sharing her story of resilience and the importance of patience, prayer, and sincerity. Each visit to the foundation's garden reminded her of the olive tree under which she first felt hope return. The tree had flourished, a living symbol of perseverance and faith, just as Tias's own spirit had. Although no romantic promises were exchanged between Tias and Ringa, their connection endured in quiet, meaningful ways. Every morning, they met in the garden that had borne witness to the beginning of her recovery. Words were often unnecessary. A glance, a subtle smile, or a shared moment of silence conveyed the depth of their bond. Tias would sometimes ask, laughing softly, "Do you remember when I insulted your hands?" Ringa's reply was calm. "If it weren't for that moment, perhaps I would have never stayed." Their story became known beyond the palace walls. Families sought Ringa's guidance for paralyzed or chronically ill relatives. True to his nature, he humbly declined to call himself a healer, insisting, "I do not heal. I only help people believe in themselves again." Yet, in many cases, the small miracles of confidence, trust, and sincere care did indeed result in remarkable progress. Sheikh Khalid, once a man of rigid pride, learned a profound lesson about humility. He recognized that knowledge, wealth, and status alone could not heal what a sincere heart could. One evening, he personally thanked Ringa, acknowledging the value of a simple soul who brought blessings through patience, devotion, and unwavering care. Time passed. Ringa eventually returned to his homeland, Indonesia, taking with him a small box of dried olive seeds from the garden, a tangible reminder of the bond they shared and the lessons learned. In his simple yard in central Java, he planted them. Years later, the tree grew tall, leaves rustling as if conveying greetings from afar. Across Riyadh, Tias stood in the garden of her family home, gazing at the western sky. She smiled, whispering softly to the wind, "Thank you, Ringa." Though separated by distance, their hearts remained united, not through possession, but through the enduring power of faith, patience, and human connection. And in that understanding, both realized the truth. Love is not always to be possessed, it is to heal, to inspire, and to leave a lasting impact on another's life. The sun set over Riyadh, painting the sky in the same golden hues that had witnessed the beginning of a miracle, a testament to hope, sincerity, and the quiet power of a compassionate heart.